Hello, this is Erica. This is Lee's daughter. And I just thought I'd come on here about a minute early, officially supposed to start at 5. It's now 4:59 p.m. on Sunday, February 16th. It's Valentine's weekend, and Lee was born on February 14th in 1938 in New York City. So today would have been her 87th birthday. I just wanted to give people a little bit of time to arrive before I begin this very special and actually a very intimate birthday celebration for her. So let's see if anyone shows up here. It's just 5 p.m. now. I hope that you're all good. We've got kind of an overcast Valentine's weekend here in New York City. We've had snow, we've had rain, we've had sleet, we've had it all. Okay. So let me try and put the why I'm doing this and sort of how this came about into context for you. My Lee Chamberlain, my mother, died in 2014. So it'll be, my God, it'll be 11 years, May 25th, 2014, this coming May. And there were or are different things that I wanted to help her with. I helped her in her first season of her Playwrights In project, where she did bring a play to the boards in the form of a reading in France. And the first playwright and the last playwright was actually Youssef Miller, and Judy Ann Elder was the director for that piece. And there were some different actors that were brought over or were recruited to do the reading, which ended up happening in the Théâtre de Nesle in Paris. So as time went on, her project was very kind of short-lived. Finally got off the ground in 2011, but of course she became ill with cancer, and then she left her body just 3 years later. So this was very, very frustrating for her. So I promised her that I would try and, push her vision forward. Now, I am not a director. My mother was a director, she was a writer, she was a very accomplished actress, and she was trained and has certain skills that I don't feel that I necessarily have. So initially people thought, oh, you should direct your mother's plays, because she wrote several plays. And if you're a part of the newsletter, if you would like to be part of the newsletter, I will post a link where you can sign up for the newsletter, and you can also look through back issues of that if you want to as well, where you can kind of go back and read about the history of the Playwrights In project. So since then, I have been wanting to find a way to preserve her legacy and also understand her mind, get into the mind of her as an artist. Of course, there are certain things I understand about her, being her child, being her daughter, and also really having a front row seat to so much of her career as it was happening and as it was unfolding. But of course, there's other things or thought processes that a person will go through, especially an artist and a thinker as brilliant as she is, which is hard to fathom from the outside. It's really hard to be in someone else's mind and figure out or to think like them. I would guess that would be the easiest way of what I'm trying to say, because brilliance has its own methodology. So much to my delight, I rediscovered a large cache of letters that my mother wrote to me And also I want to give it a shout out to her longtime friend, Susan Picard, who also gifted me with an enormous amount of correspondence that she had actually kept from Lee, dating back to like the 60s. They had actually met as students way back in 1957 when Lee was going to the Sorbonne as a student in Paris, which is where she met Susan Picard, and later the two friends found themselves both back in New York City and had a lifelong friendship. So there's certainly a lot that I could read from, but because I believe this is part of the rationale or the way my own mind works, because I have been in wonderful correspondence and in touch with Gail Merrifield Papp, who was the wife and the head of the playwright department of the Public Theater established by Joseph Papp, who of course established the New York Shakespeare Festival, which still runs to this day in Central Park. The Delacorte Theater has either completed refurbishment or will be in refurbishment. When I read Gail's book, Public Private, My Life with Joe Papp at the Public Theater, reading this book really was like reading my childhood. So many things, and it brought back so many memories. Because of course, Joe Papp was theater. He practically was New York theater. Of course, there's other people that did things, but he alone contributed the production to 600 plays, musicals, etc. in New York City alone. Now, why do I bring that up? I bring that up because if you go to the lobby of the Public Theater on Lafayette Street and look at the wall of honor, there are so many photographs of so many different actors who have performed at the New York Shakespeare Festival over the decades. And one of those people who was a friend of my mother's was Cleavon Little, okay? So Cleavon Little was born in 1939. He was from Oklahoma. And of course, wanting to be an actor, he eventually found himself in New York City, where he found himself, in a community and a pool of people, actors, and of course, the Black actors, or actors of color as you were, that was a very, very tight-knit and small community. And if you look, I highly recommend that you get this book, but if you look on page 65 of this book, I'm going to open it for you, there is this still of Cleavon from 1966 from his performance in something called The Naked Hamlet. So, of course, Cleavon is well known for doing Purlie, and of course his role in Blazing Saddles with Gene Wilder, and so many different things. But for me, when I saw Cleavon on the wall, this was like a revelation for me. And I was like, okay, now I understand, right, how, my mother and Cleavon could have crossed paths. Because, of course, Lee also performed in the Shakespeare production of King Lear with James Earl Jones and Ellen Holly, Rosalind Cash, Raoul Julia, Paul Sorvino, Renee Auberjois, and on and on. So imagine my surprise when I started reading one of her letters and found some amazing information about Cleavon. Okay. So to talk about these letters, my mother was a writer, and she really was a writer. She was always writing correspondence to people. And I have more letters that I have to retrieve, but just looking here alone from 1991, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let's see, I've got 7, 8, right? I've got 8 letters here just from 1991 alone. And that is because my mother would write me, she'd write me at least once every 2 weeks. And because I was living in Paris at the time, you see here it says addressed to Mademoiselle Chamberlain, that would be me, at 164 Rue de Vaugirard in Paris, because I was over there trying my hand at modeling at the time, and fashion modeling. That didn't deter Lee from writing me. So this particular letter that I want to share with you today, that my mind kept coming back to, was written by Lee on the 23rd of May of 1991. She was an excellent typist, and this is a 6-page typewritten letter with her signature on the bottom. So I wanted to, I want to get into this, but I want you to understand that I realize that my attempts trying to figure out how to write a biography of Lee Chamberlain is really kind of moot, because in fact, she already has written her own biography in all the letters that she had written over the years, where she really chronicles her life and her career. So here you go. Also, her nickname for me is Peaches. Okay. 23rd May, 1991. Dear Peaches, I got your card from Germany yesterday. It was dated the 13th. I had no idea you were going to Germany so soon. I guess you wanted to see what your prospects were over there right away. I have to hand it to you. When you do make your breakthrough, it will be well-deserved, and you will have a list of good stories to tell anyone who listens about what it takes to make it to the top. I'm very proud of you, and the best advice I can give you, not that you asked, is to remember that Krishna is always guiding you and always with you, and all you have to do is to take a few pauses during the day, to sit in silence, or at the end of the day, or at the beginning, or whenever you can, to listen to his advice. Remain in a state of calm when you listen, for only when it's calm can you think clearly and can you receive messages. By messages, I mean get intuitive knowledge about what you should do. You know, of course, that you are always in my prayers, morning and night, and I'm convinced you will be fine. She goes on. Well, I'm fine. I moved to Cleveland's the 18th, and what a luxury it is. I've gone from one room and a small desk where there was never enough room for my typewriter, papers, etc., to a spacious condo townhouse with not one, but 2 desks. I can work at one and type it out at another in another room. There is a small sunny patio at the front of the place and a shady patio with table and chairs and umbrella in the rear. Page 2. The living room is crowded with furniture that is too large for the room, but that gives a very comfortable lived-in feeling to it. There are huge screen TVs everywhere you look, and of course, hi-fis and all the comforts of home. The master bedroom is vast, with couches and a large TV, of course. The master bath is carpeted with the with the same deep pile as the rest of the house, from the stairs leading upstairs to the smaller second bedroom where I type. There is even a Casio keyboard. Now you know Krishna is looking out. The master bath is spacious, and a lovely skylight adds a special touch over the bathtub. The bed is mindful of something very Renaissance, with 4 squared off posts and a roof. You have to climb 3 short steps to get to bed. It's very firm, and the first thing you can see in the morning are the hills in the distance, where cypress trees and other flora greet you under the morning sun. It is quiet, and there's a washer and dryer, dishwasher, etc. The things Americans have come to expect as normal, and that I thank God for every day I'm here. I have all the time and peace and space I need to work. I'm currently working on a screenplay outline for a TV movie of the week. I'm also seeing various agents out here, and that has proven very interesting. I've seen 2 already, and the one I found to be the kind of caring, intelligent, classy, good negotiating type I'd love to have represent me. Turns out she once worked for Stark Hesseltine, one of the best in the business, whom I loved. In other words, this woman, Judith Moss, and I express the same philosophy about the business, and that's very refreshing and civilized. Page 3. They do not have a literary department, however, but that may not be a problem. Judith is resourceful and thinks such a department should exist, so she may be of help if we do make a deal. She's to call me as soon as one of the partners returns from vacation Tuesday, and I'm to go in to meet everyone the next time. The other people I saw are more of the Lower East Side hustler variety of agent. Nice enough, but lacking in what I call finesse and others may call class. That meeting also went well, and I'm to return tomorrow to see all the others there. They do have a literary department, but the price may be too high. The price of being with that agency, may be too much for me to pay in terms of peace of mind and philosophical agreement about what works and what doesn't. The Judith Moss Agency, Gores Fields, has another plus in that they do not just deal with casting directors, but also with the studios, so they know what's coming up in advance. Turns out, Cleavon was once with them, and he's still very friendly with Judith. In fact, Judith's twin sister sold Cleavon this condo. Small world. I have a 3rd agent to see next week, and then I'll make a decision. Michael Thomas set up this one coming up, and Eileen Knight set up the other 2. She finally called back, and that restored my faith in her. Page 4. I have to write Giorgio, whom I assume is back in Italy now. He was very helpful to me and to Pam, and I am so glad I met him. I am also happy he saw you before you left for Europe. He's a man gifted with special insight, so listen to him. I'm sure whatever he said you found valuable. As for paying me back, my dear, please do not give it another thought. What you have to think about is how you are going to save your money. What is the most efficient way to keep what you make and put it someplace where you can bring it back to this country when the time comes? You want to save as much as you can and not lose sight of your goal. You'll pay me back when you have your cooking school going full tilt. I have done for you what I could because I love you. I I wanted you to realize that there are responsibilities attached to borrowing and to help build your character by pointing out certain things to you, not to have you worry about when you will pay me back. You will do so when you can and when it is not a strain. You take care of yourself and your own needs right now. That is the first order of business. Believe me, for all the help I have given you or anyone else in this world, I am receiving my karmic due. These present surroundings are a gift from God, as are all things. God doesn't take 20-minute naps. He's always on the case and ahead of the case, setting up stuff for us long before we know we even need it. So stop worrying about paying me back. You just go ahead and become the top-notch model you want to be and be happy in your life. I hope you received Peaches by now. Is she too cute or what? Page 5. I went to the Buddy Tree, this great bookstore here in LA, with all sorts of our kind of books, and found a wonderful cookbook since I've decided to pay more attention to my diet instead of eating pasta 3 or more times a week. Also, I figured that when I get settled, I will have people over and it will be nice to serve them something interestingly vegetarian. It's called the Kripalu Kitchen and was drawn up by 3 people who live at Kripalu Yogic Retreat in PA. It's a wonderful book which tells you about food combining and what foods possess in terms of vitamin and mineral content, and gives you menus as well as recipes. I made a great eggplant recipe the other night. Got it all ready to stick in the oven when we couldn't work the oven. Cleavon gave me some arcane instructions about the oven, but we couldn't figure it out, so we had to take the dish, get in the car, and drive to Pam's. Cook the dish in her oven, and drive back to eat dinner. Fortunately, she lives about 3 minutes from here. The recipe was very good, and with a little embellishment will be super the next time I make it. I feel great. I'm very glad to be here and will, of course, be even happier when I get a job and money coming in and a place to live, etc. And all that good stuff. Meanwhile, this was not a mistake, and God is constantly guiding me through days that could otherwise be rough. I just keep my faith strong with remembrances of other trying times when He pulled all 3 of us through, and that, coupled with prayer and meditation and spiritual reading, keeps me going so that I'm happy all the time. You can do the same, and this is what I pray for you. I love you very much, and so does Krishna. Not only on Tuesdays and Saturdays, but every minute of every day of the year. Give my love to Tommy and Hans. Stay in touch. A big hug and a bigger kiss. Love, Mama. P.S. Roxy leaves Thursday, May 24th for Paris. She's got your address and phone number. Kiss, kiss, kiss. So there's a lot of information in this letter. The best thing I can do, I think, is to fill in the blanks. You know, who are these people, right? So I'll just start here from page 6 and then work backwards. And of course, if anyone has any questions, if you're watching this post live stream, you can just put a comment here, because at the moment I don't see any comments, so I'm going to assume that no one has any comments at the moment. So Roxy, who's Roxy? Roxy means Roxy Roker. Roxy Roker, who is the mother of Lenny Kravitz, of course, was a great actress. She was actually trained also as a Shakespearean actress. I believe she worked on the boards in London. The little bit of time I had to chat with her one day at her home, and she was a very good friend of my mother's. They were very, very close. And so because Lenny Kravitz, was doing very well in his career. He's still doing well in his career, but he was doing very well in his career in France at the time. Roxy, who was very, very proud of Lenny, was going to make a trip over. I was there in 1991. So, of course, Roxy, asked for me, wanted to see me. And, those details, my contact information was given to Roxy. And in fact, when Roxy did arrive, I did receive a phone call, and I did go and meet Roxy and another friend of hers, and also Lenny showed up, and we had a very nice meal at this restaurant called the Georges V, which is right on the Avenue Champs-Élysées. So that's who Roxy is. My mother, as you can tell, was a woman of great faith, and she understood how to speak to me in that way. So she is referring to God by one of his other names here, Krishna. She knew that I was receptive to that. So she's mentioning that how important it is for me to have faith, and that I'm being taken care of, and that I'm not alone, and that God is present and on the job all the time, right? So as she says, not only Tuesdays and Saturdays, but every minute of every day of the year. Then in this letter, she also mentions on page 6, Tommy and Hans. So Tommy and Hans, when I was living, were my roommates when I was living in Paris, or rather, I was their roommate. So this letter is addressed to 164 Rue de Vaugirard. That was in the 15th arrondissement. The metro stop is Vaugirard. And that's where Tommy Garrett and Hans Muller, they had a large apartment with 3 different bedrooms. And so I became the roommate and had a room there. And they basically coached me and showed me the ropes on how to model in Paris. So, of course, my mother is sending them her good wishes. Now, let me see who was mentioned on page 5 or any other interesting things on page 5. Okay. All right. So on page 5, my mother's talking about self-care, talking about her diet, how she went to the Buddy Tree. I don't know if that bookstore is still there, but that was a great little bookstore in LA. It might have been in the Santa Monica area. I remember she took me there one time when I was visiting. And she's just basically talking about how she decided to pay more attention to her diet. And she got this great recipe, this eggplant recipe. And of course, tells this funny story because Cleavon is not staying at the home here, this townhouse that was located in Sherman Oaks. He's away somewhere. And I guess because my mother still hasn't found her own permanent place, he's letting her stay at his place and has the run of the house. And of course, when you stay in a place, trying to find your way around the kitchen can be a challenge. So as she relays here, the instructions on how to turn on the oven were very hard to understand. She and Pam, who I'm pretty sure is Pam Poitier, one of Sidney Poitier's daughters, are basically trying to figure out how to turn on the oven because Mom's invited Pam over for dinner. They can't figure it out, so they've got to take this lasagna and drive over to Pam's house and then cook it there and then come back to Cleavon Little's place where Mom is staying. Hey, Eric, thanks for joining. And, to eat the meal. So that's what's going on there. Of course, again, in this letter, Mom, on page 5, she's also talking about how good she feels, and she's feeling good because she's keeping up her meditation practices, right? Because Lee was in a period of transition at this time. As she mentions here, she doesn't have a job at this time. Lee pretty much worked all the time. So instead of plunging into a state of despair, She is giving thanks for what she has. She's giving thanks to the fact that, just look at this, here I am in Cleavon Little's townhouse. I've got everything I could possibly want. I've got a dishwasher, a washing machine, a dryer, a beautiful view, a well-appointed bedroom. I've got 2 desks to work in, not just one. And, you know, she's doing the rounds trying to find an agent. And instead of going into a funk, she just keeps affirming her blessings and doing that by having a recollection of the other tough times, you know, that she went through as a person and also that we went through as a family, remembering, you know what, I've always been provided for and everything has always worked out. But the key to this is to remain calm. She was a woman of great faith, that is for sure. So going back to who these people are, as we work backwards through these letters here on page 4, she mentions someone named Giorgio. So Giorgio was someone that I met on one of my little adventures when I was living in Europe. I ended up going to Italy. And I ended up going to Italy because I was interested in starting my own radio show, which I actually did have a period where I did have my own radio show when I was living in Philadelphia. But because I knew that there were certain people that were having a very successful radio shows that just happened to be broadcasting sort of in and around Machiavelli's old mansion estate in Italy, I decided that I needed to go there and talk to those people to see how they did it. And when I was there, I met this person named Giorgio, who was a yogi, someone who did a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga, and who was also extremely insightful. I mean, I guess you could say he was psychic, but he really had a very good understanding of people when he met them. And he was actually able to give me a lot of good advice, basically on how to be calm, which is why my mother keeps emphasizing this over and over again, because when I was younger, let me tell you, I was a little bit of a nervous Nelly. I was just more high-strung and just in anxiety a lot. So when you're in anxiety a lot, it's very hard to, well, it's hard to be happy, for one thing, and it's hard to make clear decisions also. So here, she's saying, listen to Giorgio. He's got a lot of insight, and I'm sure whatever he tells you is valuable. And Giorgio did tell me a lot of valuable things, like a breathing exercise just to calm down. She goes on page 4 about paying her back. Now, working as a model in Paris can be a roller coaster ride because it's seasonal, right? And also, when I was working there or trying to work there in the 90s and in the early 90s, it was sporadic. And it was sporadic because the French designers at the time believed, by and large, unless you were working for Yves Saint Laurent or Givenchy or Paco Rabanne, who always used women of color in their cabine, right? The other designers only were going to hire you during the summer months because, you were tan, right? Because if you were a person of color, you kind of represented a certain kind of exoticism, and exoticism was acceptable for the summer collections, for the pret-a-porter. But when winter came along, it wasn't, as if people of color don't wear winter coats or gloves or hats during the winter months. So again, unless you had a really good, position or, with some of the aforementioned designers, you could not work. And this could be a challenge because you still had to pay your rent, right? And you still had to eat and you still had to do all those things. And because the collections or the seasons were relatively short, right? Because the designers have to design everything, they have to go into production, right? And then they're casting, and then, you walk the catwalk, right? And then there's months after that where there's really nothing going on. at least in my case, I wasn't going to Milan, right? I was doing Paris. I wasn't traveling to Milan or any other places to try and do some shows. So my mother lent me some money. That's the sum and substance of it, to help me get through. Now, being the worrywart that I was like, oh my God, I got to pay her back. I got to pay her back. Because I knew she wasn't working also, and I wanted to pay her back. But she is telling me here, listen, don't worry about it. I've given to you because I want to give to you, because I can give to you. You can see that I'm being taken care of. Look at the situation that I'm in right now. My mother stayed at Cleavon Little's house for, it was about 2 months. Originally, I think it was going to be around a month or so, maybe 6 weeks, but it ended up being another 2 weeks added on to that. And she was basically staying there, she was staying there rent-free, because I said, they were colleagues in arms, and, you do people a good turn when you can. Okay. And then she asked me, I hope you have received Peaches by now. Is she too cute or what? So who's Peaches? Peaches is the stuffed rabbit that my mother found. And for some reason, this stuffed animal reminded her of me. So she bought it and she sent it on to me in Paris, because I guess she figured I could use some comfort. I still have that stuffed animal to this day. So that's who Peaches is. And of course, my nickname is also Peaches. So let's going back to page 3 and page 2. Lee was not a person who gathered moss. No moss gathered under her feet. So even though, she was in between jobs and she was in between living situations, she was not the kind of person to have a pity party, to sit around and feel sorry for herself. She was always, trying to push forward her career. So in Cleavon's house, as she points out, she was writing. She was doing a lot of writing. She was working on a screenplay. She was working on a sitcom. And she was also shopping around for agents. So the agents that she's talking about here, who also have a connection to Cleavon, is that she's talking about, let me just go back and read this. Excuse me. Okay, so she was working on a screenplay outline for a TV movie of the week, because that was a thing back then in the 90s. And she's found her shopping around for agents to be interesting, unquote. So at the time that she wrote this letter in May of 1991, she'd already seen 2. So the first person who she saw, Judith Moss, who used to work for an old agent of hers named Stark Hesseltine. What a name. I remember Stark Hesseltine. Well, I didn't meet Stark Hesseltine in person, but I thought it was a wonderful name. But she talks about her philosophy here. She talks about her philosophy of acting, her philosophy of work, So this was very important. My mother's values were extremely important. She had a lot of integrity, and it was really something that she was not willing to compromise upon. I believe that she and Sidney Poitier were really cut from the same cloth in this regard. When Sidney was a leading man, when he was acting, he would only accept roles that he felt were in line with his values. And for example, there's that movie In the Heat of the Night, right? Where he plays, sort of an investigator, and he goes down to the South to find out, about some funny business, some murders that have gone down there. And of course, there's a scene where he's smacked in the face, right? Now, when that had originally been written, he was just supposed to take it, but he said, no, my character is not going to just take it. He smacks the person who smacks him back in the face, right? So my mother, again, she wanted to work with people that were on the same wavelength as her. She wanted to be in sync. She wanted to be in harmony because she understood that if you're not in sync and you're not in harmony with your colleagues, it's going to be an uphill battle, right? It's just going to create strife. It's like being married to someone who you don't share the same values with. So again, here she talks about Judith Moss. She talks about Judith being classy, caring, intelligent, a good negotiator. And this is something that she appreciated. She found her to be refreshing and civilized. The drawback for her in this case with this agency is that they didn't have a literary department, but she felt that that might not necessarily be a drawback because Judith Moss felt that they should have a literary department. So, if a deal would be made, she thought that it could be, in other words, basically mom would be starting off a literary department, right? If she had a work of hers, you know, accepted for production. Then she talks about the other people who she felt were, quote, Lower East Side hustler variety, that they were nice, but not, you know, she didn't really feel that it was worth the price to pay, and the price being her peace of mind and her philosophy, right? About what works and what doesn't. Then she mentions again at the end of this that, you know, Cleavon used to be represented by Judith Moss, and that in fact Cleavon had bought his townhouse condominium from Judith Moss' sister. So that's some interesting thing. And then at the end of it, she mentions Eileen Knight, who finally called her back, and who's going to be setting up another appointment, which, as my mother says here, kind of restored her faith in Eileen. Because sometimes, you know, people will tell you that they're going to call you back in Los Angeles, and it's like waiting for Godot. You know, people just never call you back. There's certain things that we expect on the East Coast, which don't necessarily happen on the West Coast, if you catch my drift. Okay, and then the first 2 pages of this really are, she's talking about how well-appointed Cleavon's home is, how comfortable she is there, that she really feels taken care of, you know, what she's working on, which I've already gone over, and how happy she was to hear from me, and that she got my card from Germany, because I went over there. I think I went over to Germany to do, I know why I went to Germany. Actually, I would go to Germany twice, but I believe this earlier iteration of going to Germany was, I was just trying to see if I could get an agent over there, right? Because in those days, even though Germany wasn't necessarily considered to be as fashion forward, being a little bit more Teutonic, they did pay well. They paid very well, and the Deutschmark at the time was very strong. So if you needed to work and you needed to make some good money, you could kind of piggyback over whatever success that you had in Paris. And, you know, a lot of girls went over to Germany to work showrooms and to do editorial and to do that type of thing. So she's encouraging me, you know, just to be calm, to try and meditate, you know, whenever I can squeeze it in, to receive the messages, to receive that divine guidance. And she's also stating that she's proud of me, how proud that she is of me, just that I've kind of got my nose to the grindstone and I'm paying my dues. And, you know, that she feels that once, you know, I sort of establish myself, that I will be very grateful. So she even saw, you know, my mother understood the importance of, quote, paying one's dues and pounding the pavement and that it was character forming, which of course she mentions later in the letter about understanding the price, you know, of borrowing money and saving and goals and all of that. So she was a very balanced person, which is not always the case in the business of show. So this is the letter from, again, mailed from Van Nuys, California, the 22nd of May, 1991. The return address was actually the home of her friend, Ginny Carter, or Virginia Carter, who was also a great support system and a longtime friend to my mother, who lived in Encino, California. So rather than rent a post office box, Ginny was kind enough to let Mom use her house address as a return address, which of course did not give away the fact that she, you know, might have been moving around and trying to settle in her own place as she sought stability. And then again, Public-Private, My Life with Joe Papp at the Public Theater. This is a fantastic book. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, there's a great photograph. I'm showing this for you, Eric. There's a great photograph of Cleavon Little on page 65 of this book in a production that Joe Papp did, which was called Naked Hamlet, which, you know, really got sort of heckled, you know, by the snobs and everything in New York at the time, because Joe Papp took a different approach to Shakespeare, wanting to make it more accessible. So my understanding is that he was using a language, you know, that was a little bit more in the vernacular of the day, you know, which was not appreciated. Another person who was in that movie, it was Sheen, right? Sheen the Elder also. So it's a wonderful book. And again, I pointed out how so many paths of actors of color crossed thanks to Joe Papp at the New York Shakespeare Festival, because he actually broke, you know, the color barrier and a lot of barriers by engaging actors of color to play different Shakespearean roles, which they were not considered to be able to do previously. So not only my mother as Cordelia, but also James Earl Jones played a couple of roles in King Lear, Raoul Julia, Ellen Holly, Rosalind Cash, Cleavon Little. Oh, I'm forgetting someone's name. Gloria, what was her last name? She was actually in The Matrix as the clairvoyant in The Matrix. Not recalling her last name right now, but you get the idea. So it's now 5:47. I said that I would end this at 6 o'clock. So Eric, if you have any questions, if you want to make a comment or something, I think if you make a comment down there, I will see it, and then I can answer a question if you have it. So let me know if you like this, if you appreciated this. I've got so many more letters of Lee Chamberlain's. I've got some letters here that span, my goodness, let me see, back to, if I'm not mistaken, I think I've got one spanning back to about 1973, where Lee kind of talks about, you know, the electric company a little bit. My mother was very ambitious, and, you know, she was always looking ahead, always looking ahead, always looking ahead. She wasn't content to stay stagnant or just to stay in one place or only to do one thing. So I want to thank you for joining me today. This is a Facebook Live that I'm reposting to YouTube. There is a dedicated channel to YouTube for Lee. She was born on February 14th, 1938 in New York City to Ida and Bernardo LaPallo. She passed away on May 25th, 2014, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, surrounded by her family. And it would have been her 87th birthday today. So thank you, and I ask you for your blessings in putting this book together, because it's a bit of a daunting task. But my idea is to be able to sort of match her CV alongside her letters, and then, you know, offer any insight, any memories, or any sort of commentary that I might have from my own memories. I was born in 1963, so my mother started taking me with her to things that she was doing and in and around the city from a very young age, you know, from the age of, you know, 5 or 6 years old. So I have got, you know, quite a few memories of, you know, watching her career unfold. All right. Well, Eric, I don't think you have any questions, but I really thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to conclude here, and I wish you all a great rest of your evening. Please, you know, like and subscribe to the page. Share this if you enjoyed it. And I will see you the next time. I'm considering doing this maybe once a month. Bye-bye now.